All right, welcome everybody. I hope everyone can hear me. If you can just give me a quick thumbs up, that would be great that you can hear me. Awesome. We apologize for a little bit of a delay here today getting started with our advising panel, but we are super excited to have an awesome panel with us today, and we're going to get started here with some questions for our panelists. I hope you guys have been having a great conference so far today. And we're just going to start initially with allowing each of the panelists just a few moments to introduce themselves to us. If you don't mind sharing your name, your role, the campus that you're affiliated with, and how you began to work with advising with this particular age group. And if we could start with Colleen, you're the first one on my screen, that'd be great.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Colleen Kelly Falk. So let me just make it clear, when I signed up, I was the early college liaison here at Southeastern Community College. But as of 9/1, I am now the Dean of Student Services. So I'm so excited about that role and still excited to be a part. So I started in admissions with advising, and then I transitioned and started with CCP and became my primary role with academic advising. And then from there, went to early college and started being the academic advising for that group. So that's really been my start out with academic advising and kind of where I started with my high school. I like traditional students, but my high school students kind of won me over.
And we'll go next to Melissa and then Mindy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Melissa Biegert. I am with Austin Community College, where I serve as the Director of Academic Success for high school programs. And I actually came into this realm from the faculty side originally. I was a faculty member at another college several years ago that had an early college high school attached to it. And I became really enamored of early college programs and just really enamored of the students and what it could do for them. And I came to ACC about 8 years ago to work specifically with our early college high school programs to improve them and expand them for the college. And now I oversee an advising team that works with all high school students. We usually have over 8,000 high school students each year and an entire staff that helps serve them.
My name is Dr. Mindy Collins, and I'm from Nash Community College in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I started out as a public school teacher. I was in the public school system for 21 years, and I transitioned to higher ed in 2019. I was a career coach for a little while, a little bit, and then I transitioned into the director of CCP. And I have a passion for students of all ages, not just high school aged.
Awesome. Interesting to hear the journeys that each of you have had coming to this particular work. And I know obviously the focus of our panel today is on advising with our dual enrollment population. So I wanted to just take a second to jump right in and ask you guys, each of you, to share a little bit about how advising on your campus is structured or handled. And if you can also speak while you're sharing about how it's structured, sort of whether or not advising is required for your dual enrollment students and what that looks like. And this time we'll start with Melissa, if you'll share first, and then we will go with Mindy, and then Colleen, if you can wrap us up, sharing about the structure, how it's handled on your campus, and then whether or not it's something that's required for your students.
So yeah, so at ACC, we actually have a dedicated team of advisors for high school students. And that's something, we were kind of one of the first community colleges to have an entire staff of specialists who are advising for these students who are in high school taking college courses, and still have probably one of the largest. We have a team of about 10 employees who help handle all of the advising for all of our high schoolers. And it really grew out of our early college high school program. As we were growing it, we saw the value in having dedicated advisors who could do holistic advising for our students. It would help help the students kind of deal with everything that was going on in their lives, and also who were specialists in understanding the unique nature of dual credit programs, because there are some unique restrictions and requirements for our high school students. And so we have found having a specialized team really helps in ensuring that our students are being very intentional when they take these courses, that we are working as partners with our high schools to give as much support to the students as we can and help get them on a college going pathway. It is required, advising is required for all of our high school students. We have a different enrollment team that does the initial recruitment and onboarding for students, and they do kind of the initial advising for the students. But then once they're enrolled in their first class, our team takes over and they do midterm advising for students, especially those who don't come from a college going background, who have had some difficulty with classes and other things like that, where we want to really monitor their progress. Touch points kind of throughout the semester in which our advising staff is required to touch base with our students.
Am I next, Ms. Lair? Okay, so at Nash Community College, we have an advising center for traditional students and a CCP center for dual credit students. Our high school partners are assigned a specific career coach who advises students regarding pathways and appropriate course selection. And students are required to meet with career coaches when they enter the CCP program, and they're highly encouraged to continue doing that as they continue their dual enrollment studies. Pre-pandemic, our coaches visited high schools at least once weekly for advising sessions. However, during the pandemic, we transitioned to virtual advising, and we have found that virtual advising offers some positive benefits. One, students are not pulled out of instructional time because meetings can occur even after school hours. And additionally, students often bring their parents or guardians to these meetings, which strengthens partnerships and just improves communication.
Our model is similar to Mandy, where we have our student services advisors. They start with admission, the admission process, and then they go with them the entire way. They do academic advising, they get them enrolled, and they continue that. They did pre-COVID go to high schools weekly. We are a small rural area, so two of our advisors, they kind of split the high schools between each other. And so they advised them one-on-one. And yes, it is required for students to have academic advising. So the kind of like the similar structure as Mandy mentioned earlier.
This is really great to have such different perspectives, because we have Melissa in Texas, and then two of you I know are in North Carolina, but different parts of North Carolina. So it's interesting in hearing how things are working on your campuses, the similarities, right? No matter where you are, a lot of similar approaches to working with these students. So thinking about that and thinking about sort of the trial and error that sometimes this work becomes when you're working with this population. Would each of you be able to just share with us some of the things that have worked in terms of advising your dual enrollment students? So what's worked, but equally so, maybe sharing some things that didn't work, because I think sometimes we learn a lot from those trips, those trip ups that we tend to have. We learn a lot in those. So if you guys can share sort of what worked, and then maybe a little of what didn't work with some of the strategies or approaches that you've taken with advising. So we'll switch the order just a little bit. And this time we'll start with Mindy, and then Colleen, and then end with Melissa.
So one area that has most significantly impacted success in our program is communication. And we have found that if we clearly communicate with high school partners, things run much smoother and more successfully. So as a response to that, we have created a multitude of literature, such as a CCP handbook and how-to packets to help students navigate our program. And we also have added monthly joint meetings with the public school system, and we have monthly virtual information sessions for the broader community. So just disseminating information has helped a lot, because the more you can put out there and let people know about the program, the more your enrollment grows and the more comfortable people become with contacting you and getting into our program. Another important factor that has contributed to student success is the utilization of a VISO. And I am aware not all community colleges have access to a VISO, but this is a wonderful program. And with this program, our coaches are able to respond to alerts, and that allows for early intervention when students have attendance and/or academic issues. Additionally, a VISO allows for progress reports to be shared with our high school partners, and that is another ongoing communication tool that positively impacts student success. I will say there are days when you said to talk about something that maybe is difficult. There are days when you open up your inbox and you have a whole lot of alerts from instructors and system generated alerts. So those days are not always easy, but they're not every day, but some of those days do come.
You lost your audio, Mindy.
Sorry, I think I hit it by accident. So I said, if you can intervene early, I don't know if you heard the end part of that, but if you can intervene early, that's a big part of the battle right there.
So I would say for us, the things that have worked, we have done. I think the difference for us was that we missed that high school piece where we had parents. So before pre-COVID, parents would come in. So a lot of our students would, student advisors would have appointments after school so parents could attend. And so with COVID coming up, it was a little different because they did a lot of phone and Teams and Zoom advising sessions. So, and sometimes those were during the day and parents weren't available. So that was one thing I really think we did miss with students, and then just having that personal relationship. But what has really worked, even in that though, we changed our process. So a lot of things that we do now are more electronic. So that's easy access to our students and their parents to get the information from our website and be able to turn papers in. So kind of like COVID helped us kind of streamline it a little bit better. So that's what's worked for us. And then as Mandy said, we use a VZO also. And so our student advisors, when they're, I will celebrate this. We do grade alerts. So when they are doing well, we celebrate that. But then we also do the grade alerts that when they fall below a certain grade point, that then we have to reach out. So I think that is the challenge with us. I'm not going to say it didn't work. That's just been the challenge of us having to reach out with them and trying to explain situations as they relate for students, grades dropping and that thing. But we use a VCO, and like I said, it's an excellent tool.
And so at ACC, I wish we had the same kinds of tools that you guys had in North Carolina. A lot of the tools that we have found to be most effective are ones that we had to kind of develop ourselves. We have found that our area kind of becomes the beta tester for things that are broader student affairs area we'd like to try or have thought about wanting to try for all of our traditional students. Sometimes we're able to say, hey, we'd really like to do this, so let's test it out with the high schoolers first. So the great thing about that is that many of the things that we have started to experiment with in our advising area have later become adopted, and we kind of help to actually expand and improve advising for all students in that way. The midterm advising is a good example of that. At ACC, we do not require our faculty to give midterm grades. So one of our biggest challenges as advisors is, how do we find out in real time how a student is doing so that we can intervene before it's too late, and how do we get that information? And so we developed our own form for students to fill out for us. And it was very clunky. It was one of those things, we're talking about things that didn't work so well. It took a lot of trial and error to find something that would work. And we were also relying on self-reporting. So that was really interesting too, because it assumes the student is going to be accurate with us in what they're telling us. Actually, what we found is they were actually pretty honest. They just were usually overly optimistic. So when we would get the grade report and look and see where a student was reporting that they had made like a 30% on all of their tests, and at the midterm, they were swearing that they thought they could get an A in the class, we had to have that real, come to Jesus meeting with them about, maybe not. But it showed that there was value in getting that midpoint touch base. It also helped us leverage training our faculty to use early alerts. Early alerts are something that now our college is expanding for everyone. And the alerts, that if a faculty member uses the alerts, it will send a notification to a student's advisor. But that was something really new for our college. And we started implementing it very early. We were an early adopter and tester for early alerts, because that is so important. I mean, our number one sort of line of defense for our students is the faculty. They're the ones that can tell us, are the students participating? If you have a student you haven't heard from for 2 weeks, we need to know that. And then we can reach out to our partners, and sometimes even the high school, they don't realize that the kid has gone AWOL for 2 weeks and hasn't been turning anything in. So, those are kind of the pros and cons. What we have found is that even for things that didn't work so well, we learn from that. And oftentimes we're able to improve it and see how can we make this work so that we have better advising all the way around and advising for the entire college.
Wow. I'm trying to monitor the chat on the live stream at the same time as sort of moderating here as well. So one of the questions that I saw that I think is relevant just where we are right now, so I'm not going to hold it to the end. There was a question around using the software, the Aviso software that Mindy and Colleen spoke to a moment ago. And the question was if both the college and the K-12 partners were using that particular resource. So if you guys, Mindy and Colleen, can speak to that just really quickly before we move on, that would be great.
So for us, we have given some of our high school partners access. So for instance, like the guidance counselors at the high schools, they have access to Aviso to see the alerts also. They can't actually, work in Aviso, but they see the alerts. So where I can actually contact the student through Aviso, they can see what's going on. So we kind of added that extra layer and that extra layer of support. So also they can be aware of what's going on with their students.
We do not have give access to high school partners for Aviso, but every alert is shared with our high school partners. So when we receive an alert, we copy the counselor, and if it's a CTE pathway, we also copy the CDC. So even though they are not actually physically allowed to log in and check the alerts, they are shared. Everything is shared with them.
And just for the benefit of our folks who may not be from North Carolina and familiar with the acronym CDC, that stands for Career Development Coordinator. Those are individuals that serve on our high school campuses in the state who are sort of the primary connections for our students in the high schools to the community college and to the offerings that the community college has for them through dual enrollment. So just a little, I guess, fill in there for those who may not be familiar with that acronym. So Melissa actually did a really great setup a minute ago, leading us into this next question that I think is a good one as well. Obviously, working with our dual enrollment students, they are the youngest students on our campuses. So working with them in terms of advising, it can be challenging. It's a different age group. So some of the strategies that you may have may need to be adjusted. And so if we could have each of you speak to what some of the considerations are that you have taken into account in working with these students, that would be great. And just sort of how you've navigated the waters of advising and working closely with these youngest students on our campus to ensure their success. So Melissa, if you don't mind, we'll start with you with this question, and then we'll go with Mindy and then Colleen. That'd be great.
So one of the reasons why we developed this specialized advising team at ACC is that it was becoming really clear that sometimes when our traditional advisors would try to advise our high school students who came in off the streets, it was really difficult for them to be able to know all of the restrictions from the high school side. And so by having our specialized advisors, and they have a specific caseload. So we have 26 different school districts that we work with, as well as homeschool students and a lot of privates and charters. And so on your caseload, it's really important for the advisors that, first of all, they have to understand the state restrictions when it comes to what students can and cannot take, or what can and cannot be waived for tuition, because we waive quite a bit the cost of our tuition, but we can't for every course. What are those restrictions that come down? What are the school district's limitations? Because each school district can set their own restrictions on what is allowed for dual credit. What are the special considerations for homeschool students? All of that. So there's a lot of rules and regulations and a lot of layers that it's really important for you to know when advising the students, so that they make good choices. And, one of the directives from our legislature, Texas is a little like North Carolina in that it is very supportive of dual credit, which is fantastic. But our state legislature has been really clear. They don't want these to be courses that go nowhere. They don't want people to just try dual credit just to try out college. They really want students to be really intentional. This is getting them somewhere, and it's going to make them progress eventually to a degree. So it's really important to understand kind of how all those different layers fit in with that. And then, of course, the other thing is just what you mentioned about the age of the students. And, we can probably all talk about, the developmental issues there. But one of the things that we have found that's also a positive thing is knowing that the students have the school district behind them as well. And so we can leverage that. We can leverage that partnership. The student is not alone. They actually have so many wraparound services on both sides that can help them, but we have to work together with that. We also have to work with parents. And that's probably one of the biggest adjustments between our traditional students who are already adults and the high school students, is understanding parents can actually be an asset. And so we have really tried to improve our communication directly to parents, so they understand this whole world of dual credit a lot better and can be partners, not someone that we're kind of holding at arm's length, because of FERPA and all of those things, but really see them as partners who want the best for their children.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. And
Microphone.
can you hear me now, Ms. Lair? I'm sorry. So when advising dually enrolled students at Nash Community, I think the biggest factor that we consider is that we want to holistically get to know each student. As an advisor, I just think it's critically important to develop that caring relationship with the students and take time to discuss, what do you want to do when you graduate from high school? And for some students, that means a four-year institution. And for many students, it means going directly to the workforce or going into a trade, that kind of thing. So you have to figure out what every student would really like to do, because again, not every student is destined to attend a four-year institution. And it's essential to truly get to know your caseload and find out what they're interested in and passionate about, so that you can provide strategic advising. Additionally, another factor to consider is the high school side of things, which I think Melissa talked about as well. High school counselors have to be active partners when determining pathways for students and appropriate classes. And you need to make sure that they're buying into the CCP program. I often say that counselors are our biggest marketers. So you need to get them in, bring them in and make them understand the value of the program. And since they have to find a place to put these classes in Power School and work with you to support student success, you have to be a team with counselors and the CDC, the Career Development Coordinator. And lastly, while high school students are taking college classes, they are still ultimately, they're high school students. Yes, they're held to the same accountability standards as traditional college students, but it's essential to communicate college expectations and procedures to them on the front end of enrollment and registration. That communication piece is huge, so you don't have issues on the tail end.
So for us, the things to consider with advising and enrolling CCP students, one thing for us that we check with the counselors is to see the high school requirements. So what courses will the high school allow students to substitute? And more importantly, where the student is in high school. So for instance, if we know in the fall, this student is playing fall sport, so we suggest, okay, hold back. Let's take on like one course. If we know that heavily in the spring, that student is playing a lot of spring sports, then we say, okay, let's do one class in the spring. We really start, like you said, holistically look at the student and see what's going on with them. And then also make sure that not only their high school requirements are met, but at the same time that we're not overlapping. So if we're giving them a heavy, rigorous course in the college, we want to see, well, what's the high school schedule? So we can try to balance that out with our students. And that is really one of the things that is really important, not only to the student, but to the parent, because the parents sometimes say, oh, that workload is really heavy. So we want to be able to balance the students' workload. And so that's one of the things that we really try to consider with asking students, hey, what you got going on in the fall? What you got going in spring? What you doing? And so we kind of have those kind of conversations. We ask, are you working? You know, you're involved in some community activities. We just try to really get to know the student, like you mentioned earlier, so we can help advise them holistically. All right, I believe we got about 5 more minutes, guys.
Did you want to talk about how COVID has changed the way we advise high school students? I can talk a little bit about that.
Yep, go ahead and start us off.
So, you know, we all know COVID has assuredly changed not only education, but the whole world, right? What is normal anymore? But while there's a multitude of negative outcomes related to COVID, there's also a lot of positive things that have come out of COVID, a lot of positive takeaways, especially in the field of education. I think, first of all, the pandemic has forced us to be more compassionate and to think outside the box, and to also treat students more individualistically. With CCP specifically, we have developed ways to reach more students because we're not confined to traditional school hours anymore, which has been a huge aha moment with our program. We can now meet with students at any time, anywhere, utilizing virtual devices. This has also allowed us to increase the amount of time we meet with students because we're not in the schools having to look at our watch to get them back to class on time. So that's been a game changer as well. The pandemic has also allowed students more flexibility when choosing their learning platforms. And while most students, I would say the majority, do like being in person, face-to-face for instruction, we also have a great many students who prefer online and virtual instruction. And some of those students had never had to take online or virtual classes until the pandemic. And they took them and realized, hey, I can be successful and have a little bit more flexibility with my schedule with online. So that has opened up a whole new world as well. Additionally, COVID has given advising a more personal undertone, I think. Many students are struggling with mental health, And I think, Colleen, you talked about they're working jobs, they're trying to juggle school and work and athletics, and they're just feeling a lot of pressure in a society with pandemic parameters. So this has offered us a lot of opportunities as advisors to meet these challenges through sharing resources that we have available at the college. And it hasn't been easy, but it has provided a more, I think, humanistic element to advising.
So I think a question in the chat has come up asking us to talk about how we work with the high school partners or high school counselors to help them advise and train students. So one of the things we do, we have a IGP, we have a guide for academic advising that allow teacher counselors to see on our website to look at our different programs that we offer at our school. So sometimes before we even get there, they've kind of already have their pep talk with the students for us. So we kind of use that guidance with them and asking questions and real open communication between us and the counselors. Time will let us always do one-on-one training, but we have given them access to our process. And also in the past, we've been giving them our CCP manuals, and we've done like a campus manual or directory just for questions and things of that nature. So that's what we've used in the past to kind of help with our CCP partners and things of that nature. Anybody else?
So I'll jump in on that question, but first I actually wanted to add something about the COVID question about how it's changed. One of the surprising things that for us is that it's actually created a tighter partnership between our advising staff and our faculty in working together on issues around COVID. I mean, definitely with, we have learned to use technology better in communicating with our students, but particularly this fall, what we have found is that, we have tried to go back to as many in-person classes as possible this fall. It was not entirely possible with all of our high school classes. There were some, because our high schools consistently said, some of our students do fine with online learning, but we really prefer to have that in-person professor. So they tried to switch as many classes back to in-person as possible. And in some cases, they just could not find the faculty member. And so for those classes where we had to have online, we have tried to partner with those departments to say, can we find a tutor or someone who can be in the classroom? And this is something we've actually been wanting to do for years, is increase the in-class embedded tutors in our high school classes, our dual credit classes. And we've been able to do that with some of these courses that are having to be taught by an online instructor, but we are able from the college side to find someone who can actually be in the class to help the students, in real time, not just as a proctor, but as a tutor. And so we're really excited about that. And we're already talking about doing that for spring classes, even ones that are in person. How can we have an embedded tutor to help the students? And so that is really exciting. So it's a good thing that's actually come out of COVID. The other thing that has come out of it that in some ways has been a challenge, but also I think a blessing in a way, is that we are constantly having to navigate how do we deal with students and faculty who have to be quarantined. Because as we've come back this fall, that is happening a lot. It was almost easier when we had to switch all of a sudden in mid-semester from going to in-person to 100% online. And last year we were almost 100% online. We wanted to try to do in-person this year, but what we're finding is people are constantly having to be out due to quarantine. And so what it's created is a new reality that we have to be flexible in our classrooms. We have to almost by nature offer hybrid classes that can enable students to flip if they have to going, how do we learn remotely when we're back in the classroom? And even with the instructors, we've had a couple of instructors that have had to quarantine. How do we make sure that they can still offer that instruction for the students? And so our advising staff have taken on a lot of that load of working with the high schools and the faculty to make sure students can still be successful no matter what the situation is, and it may change day by day. So we're all learning to work on our feet really, really fast. But I think that what's going to come out of this is a really needed conversation about how we can always be more mobile. Because the truth is, for our students who have the greatest challenges, for them, life is like a constant pandemic. Many of our students who struggle the most, it's because of things outside of the classroom. They are constantly dealing with challenges going on in the world, and sometimes they have to pivot. And we've not always been sensitive to that. I think now we're going to come out of this much more sensitive to the fact that sometimes life happens with our students, and we need to do what we can to help them to navigate through those things, and they'll be more successful in the long run. Oh, and the other question, I was going to follow up on the question about partnerships. So yes, we do partner with our high schools, and our counselors are our favorite people. They are the folks that we work with most closely, not only on helping the students pick the classes, but we also know the counselors are the ones who are there with the students on a day-to-day basis at the high school. And what we have found, particularly among our high schools that have the largest percentage of students who don't come from a college-going family, it's really important to have consistent, good folks supporting them on the high school side. And some of our most challenged high schools, we have seen great increases in success when they have constant support at the high school level. But if they go through a year where they have a lot of churn in the high school counselors and a lot of change, their success rates will go down, because they need that consistency of support. And so just realizing that, it helps with our conversation with our ISDs about the need to really offer consistency and good quality counseling support services at the high schools, especially the most challenged high schools.
We also consider counselors to be, again, our biggest marketers, and we really recognize that they are truly essential they're our bread and butter, so to speak, for CCP. And one thing that we are doing that I know Ms. Lair is spearheading is the Pathway Cards project with CCP in North Carolina. And so we're working on a pathway card for each of our pathways that we offer for CCP. And we would have, for example, the high school cluster and how it relates to the CCP pathway, and then additional certifications and diplomas, the associate's degree, if we have any partnerships with four-year institutions, and then careers, potential careers. And so once we get those pathway cards done, we hope to share those in notebooks with our counselors. And so that would help them with assisting us with advising as well.
I'm actually going to ask a question of you North Carolina folks, if you don't mind, because I am kind of curious. You both talked a lot about career advising, and this is something we have just recently at ACC have pinpointed designated advisors to work specifically with our career and tech dual credit students, different from our ones that are doing a traditional academic path. Have you seen in North Carolina a difference in the way you do advising for students who are on a technical path versus those that are on an academic transfer path? And Colleen, since you're on mic, do you want to go first?
Oh, I got so many things going right now. Okay. The last part, I guess, when you asked about career, for us, we're starting to do something with career assessment. So now we're starting to have our students we're kind of changing our process for our students to be able to do a career assessment, and then to kind of guide them. That is really going to be the piece that we use to help guide them into their field. Because once they do the career assessment, that's what we're going to use for academic advising. And so once we started from as career coaches in admissions, and then we'll get them started with the advising piece, but then we'll transition into the faculty taking it from there. The faculty advisor, well, not with CCP, that's with our traditional students, but with CCP, it'll still be us to kind of help them go to that next level. Because it almost asked, there was a question from the chat that kind of blends with what you're asking about, can we each share on what we think dual enrollment students need most when transitioning, and how can advisors help? And so to go along kind of with your question, what we said, that is one of the pieces that we're adding here at Southeastern, this career assessment piece. They kind of also help students find their way even the more, especially with our CCP students. So they'll know it's okay if I want to go to a 4-year, or maybe I just want to continue the 2-year degree, and it's okay. And so just encouraging them in those ways. And that's how I think how advising can help in that transition, is that we can help the student support this information, but then also we may have to be an extra layer of support to get that student to communicate that to their parent, when the parent has had all these type dreams for them. So I'm gonna move on. Somebody else could answer, kind of blend in with that, maybe.
I try not to see any difference between a college transfer pathway and a CTE pathway. No pathway is any more important than any other. I think our CTE pathways are just critically important, especially in our community where we need employees. So no, we do not advise differently. However, we just have to make sure that we're following those pathways. But we don't encourage the CTP pathway over CTE. We again would meet with the student and find out what he or she is most interested in doing when they graduate. We also try to follow that high school career cluster. And once they get to that, they're trying to get them to that concentrator in high school, and then we can kind of pick up from there. But no, I don't like to, one thing I don't like to do is see pathways any better or less important than any other pathway. I think they're all equally important.
And Mandy, there was a question for you about career assessment. What career assessments are you using? And that was the question for you.
For me specifically?
Yeah, that's what it says.
Okay, well, we use CFNC. We use their website quite frequently, and if we have to do a career assessment. But I will be honest with you, most of the time when I meet with a student, they pretty much, I mean, I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but most of the time they have at least, they've narrowed it down to what they want to do, or they have maybe 2 or 3 things they're thinking about doing. It's very rare that you, and I know that sounds odd because you would think in high school they would be kind of all over the place, but for me personally, it's very rare that I meet with the student and they just have no clue what they might want to do at all. They usually have an inkling. And most of the time, in all honesty, the parents, when I meet with them, with the students, the parents are the ones who are pushing the 4-year institution. If you can get the student and meet with the student individually, they will really tell you what they want to do. But again, if I have to do an assessment, I'll go to CFNC's website, but I don't have to do that very often because oddly enough, they do know, at least in the ballpark, of what they want to do when they come to me usually.
Michelle, I think you, is your mic working yet? No. So I can't see the questions in the chat. Do we have any more that have come in?
I can't see them either, Melissa. So I'm relying on Colleen.
Yeah,
Colleen, you're in charge.
I think so far, I think we may have about 2 more minutes left. And there may not be any more questions yet left for us. But again, one thing that you said, Melissa, about, CTE or college transfer, we try to be real open. The question was, the other part was that how often you check in with students once they're on board, with onboarding. How often do we check in with students? And so again, if you want to go ahead, Melissa, and then
yeah, I can. So once students start, what we have discovered is that there are many different ways to check in with students. So we do them all. Check in, maybe, sending them emails or sending them letters. We've actually had a lot of luck with snail mail. We've gone, it's amazing how sometimes things go retro. It's great for using technology for like setting up when you have to do face-to-face advising sessions. Sometimes you can use the technology, but we have had a lot of success with letters, and because the parents will open the letters, and when the parents see it, they make sure the kid sees it. And so we send letters out, for students who have fallen below the 67% completion rate for SAP, because we want students to be really mindful of that. that, that we don't want them that to negatively impact them in the long term. We get a great response rate for that. So, things like that. We try every method. And so we do it multiple times throughout the semester. And then for students, particularly students that need a special sort of attention, we make sure we do midterm advising, but there are usually multiple touches throughout the semester in many different ways and lots of different communication methods.
It's the same at Nash Community College. And of course, you're going to meet with some students more than others, right? So if a student's struggling a little bit, you might have 15 touch points with them, whereas you might have 2 or 3 with another. But we definitely like to meet with them on the front end. And then we also are doing those alerts during the semester, whether they be system generated or instructor alerts. And then we also try to meet with them around mid-semester and start talking about what they might want to do next semester. So it just depends on the student. That's kind of a difficult question because it's so subjective from student to student, but it's multiple times. And in North Carolina, Melissa, I don't know if it's like this in Texas, but we have to turn in a data report to the state at the end of the year, and we have to document our touch points for advising sessions and why we met with them, how we met with them. And so that kind of makes sure that you are staying on track as well.
So again, how we do onboarding, we continuously communicate. We'll go to the schools. Also now we're doing virtual appointments. So that's another way that's helping us continue to check in with our students. And then they know we have an open door policy. So even if they don't have an appointment, we're at the school, they're able to come in and say between classes, hey, I need to talk real quick. Or if we see something wrong, we say, come see us, we'll be at your school today. So at this point, can we each just give like a closing remark, maybe a brief, probably 30 seconds?
Sure, we'll do final closing remarks. We're at time, so just want to thank everybody for joining us. All I can say is, advising is really important for our high schoolers as well as our traditional students, and whatever we need to do to help support our students is the most important thing.
And thank everybody for listening and joining us today. My team, if you're out there, you know what I'm going to say. Slow and steady wins the race. So sometimes we feel overwhelmed because we have a lot of CCP students and we have a lot of registrations and advising sessions to get through. And I want them all to be done today. But I constantly tell my team, slow and steady, slow and steady. And somehow, some way it all gets done. So teamwork makes the dream work. That's another one of my sayings. But thank you for joining us today.
All right. Well, again, thank you. And we're so excited about everything that was said today. And the questions from the chat was awesome. So thank you all for your feedback. We're really enjoying it. And so again, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Mindy. Mez, I see you down the bottom. Thank you for coming in too. So you all have a great day.
Thank you, Ms. Lair.
Thanks, guys. It was fun.
Bye. Thank you.